Okay, welcome fourth graders to another science test review. Today we are going to be talking about ecosystems. Okay, so let's jump right into it. Ecosystems basically are living and non-living things that interact and work together in an environment. Okay, now like I said before, an ecosystem could be made up of living or non-living factors that work together in an environment. So I made this little puzzle piece here because a puzzle and all of the puzzle pieces all kind of work together. They interact with one another by locking together to create a big picture. So each puzzle piece, once again, interacts, works with, needs one another to create a big picture, or in our story, or in our example, a ecosystem. Okay, so here is the small little puzzle here, and it's made up of these different interacting pieces that work together. You can see the abiotic factor here, which is a non-living things. You can see this piece here, it is not living, it's stiff. Okay, this black piece. Whereas in this biotic piece here, you can tell that that particular piece is living. It's got hair, it's got eyes, it's got a face, it's got legs. This is the living part of this ecosystem puzzle. All right? Now, what are, in a real ecosystem, what are some of the things that make up these non-living abiotic factors? Well, you have climate, which is the weather or the temperature in any given area over a long period of time. You have rainfall, are abiotic factors. Water's not living. You have the solar energy, or the sun. Those are abiotic factors, the temperature. So you have temperature, rainfall, climate, the soil. Okay, those are abiotic factors that make up that are parts of the ecosystem. What are the biotic factors, the living pieces of a ecosystem puzzle? Well, you have, of course, the animals, you have the trees, are all part of the living things, and I'm sure you can think of some other examples. There's different ecosystems, and we've mentioned them in the book. You have like a desert ecosystem, you have a pond ecosystem, you have a coral reef ecosystem, and behind me you have a rainforest ecosystem. But there's lots of different kinds of ecosystem. How would you know what kind of ecosystem you're in? Well, you would look around and you would ask yourself, and you would look around at the abiotic and the biotic factors. Oh, like the abiotic factors, gosh, the sun, it's really hot here. You'd grab the soil and pick it up and say, you know what, it's just dirt. It's really dry and grainy. You would look around at the biotic factors and you'd say, gosh, there's lots of shrubs. There is not a lot of green plants. Where are the animals? I don't see very many animals out here. What kind of ecosystem do you think I'm describing? Shrubs, very hot, dry ground, not a lot of animals out during the day. This would be a desert ecosystem. So you can tell, once again, what kind of ecosystem you're in by looking around at the biotic and abiotic factors. Let's take a look at a few ecosystems in more specific detail. You can see here, this is a rough sketch of a rainforest ecosystem. In a rainforest ecosystem, you have different layers of the forest. The very top level of the trees is the emergent layer. It's really hot. You're going to get a lot of rainfall up there because it's at the very top, so it's going to be soaking up a lot of the rain. Not a lot of animals live up here. One, because it's either too wet when it's raining, or it's too hot because the sun, once again, is going to be beating down right on the top here. The canopy layer, which is right kind of the second level, this is the canopy layer, and this is where a lot of animals are going to be hiding. They're protected from the sun, they're protected from the rain a little bit, but they can still live high above the ground, so they're protected from a lot of the danger that's on the forest floor. So this is where the monkeys, snakes, and a lot of birds would be. Then you have the understory, okay? And then at the very bottom, which would be the forest floor. And the soil is not very rich because the sun and the water don't oftentimes get all the way down to the forest floor because the emergent layer blocks a lot of it. So the soil is not very rich because it never gets water and it hardly ever gets sun. The forest floor, that's where you're going to have a lot of your cats, like the jaguar and that sort of thing there at the bottom. We talked about animals constantly have to adapt to their ecosystem when the environment changes. For example, during an animal that lives in the desert, it's too hot for them to go out during the day and hunt for their food. So the animals in a desert ecosystem have to adapt, and what they do, some of them, is they actually sleep during the day underground because it's a lot cooler, and then once the sun goes down and it's cooler at night, then they come out and they do their hunting. We talked about climate already. Climate is what the weather is generally like over the entire year. Like, for example, in Murrieta, if I asked you what kind of climate do we have in Murrieta, you would say, well, it's hot, it's sunny. Does it rain sometimes in Murrieta? Yes, but the general overall what the temperature and weather is usually like in Murrieta is hot and sunny, so that would be the climate. Another ecosystem that we can talk about is the coral reef ecosystem. Basically what happens, and there is a good picture of a nice coral reef ecosystem in your book, and that's on page 90. If you've ever seen pictures of Hawaii, they have the real clear water, and inside, underneath, in the water there in the shallow, that's where a lot of people go snorkeling. It's because it's colorful. It's filled with all of that hard, colorful reef. What that is, actually, is dead animals, okay, like a fish. When the fish dies and it lands on the ground, its hard skeleton, because after a while the scales go away and only the skeleton remains. Well, the next thing you know, another fish dies and its skeleton lands on top of the old dead one. Pretty soon, all of these skeletons start adding up and hardening over many of years, and that turns into the coral reef that you see at the bottom of an ocean. The dead fish that usually make up the reefs are called coral polyps. It says right there in your book, coral reefs are formed from organisms that are no longer living. These coral polyps are tiny animals that live in large groups. When they die, they leave behind hard skeletons to form these coral reefs. I think that's pretty much it as far as the ecosystems are concerned. We talked about how animals adapt. There are different sizes of ecosystems. There is a small pond ecosystem, or you can have an entire rainforest be an ecosystem. It's all about how the living and non-living things just happen to be interacting with one another in that environment. Yeah, I think that's it for the test. We talked about rainfall, which are abiotic factors. Yep, that is it. I hope you guys have enjoyed this ecosystems test, or this test review. I covered everything that you're going to need to know for the test. So make sure that you watch this a couple times if you need to. Contact me on Facebook, Edmodo. Go to my class website, email, any of those ways. Ask your classmates questions. They can help you out, and that's pretty much it. I look forward to seeing you guys in class.